A confused old woman rattling around alone. What Brooke didn't know I was holding at the guardianship hearing. The pen was already in my hand when Brooke slid the paper across the kitchen table and covered my fingers with hers. And the sound she made was so gentle, it took me a second to understand she was performing. "Just here, Lois," she said, tapping the signature line, her voice pitched for the two men standing behind her. "You don't have to read all of it. You get confused when there's a lot of words, remember? It's okay. It's just so someone can help you with the house." The two men were from a company called Silverbridge Senior Transitions. One of them smelled like cinnamon gum. Above the stove, the old clock my husband hung in 1979 ticked its dry little tick, and the November light came in gray and flat across the linoleum, and my daughter-in-law smiled at me, the way you smile at a dog that's about to be put down. "She's a confused old woman rattling around alone in a house this size," Brooke told them, not even lowering her voice, as if I'd already left the room. "It's honestly a safety issue. I've been documenting it." I set the pen down. I set it down very quietly, and I looked at Brooke's pretty, patient, poisonous face, and I thought, you have no idea what's in the drawer under the stairs. Because here's the thing my daughter-in-law never once bothered to check. She had spent 11 months building a story about a foggy old widow who couldn't be trusted with her own front door. She had a lawyer, a stack of incident logs, and a court date. What she did not have, what she never imagined I'd kept, was the one piece of paper that made her whole plan a house of cards. And I was going to let her build it all the way to the top before I breathed on it. Let me take you back to the beginning, because you should understand exactly how patient I can be. I was born Lois Ann Farkas in 1948 in a rented flat on Portage Street here in Kalamazoo, Michigan, the third of 5 kids of a paper mill foreman who counted every nickel twice. We were not poor exactly. We were the kind of careful that looks like poor from the outside. My mother sewed our coats. I wore my sister Rosemary's shoes for 2 years after she outgrew them, and I learned, before I was 10, that the people who talk the loudest about generosity are usually the ones with the emptiest hands. I met Dimitrios Petrakis in 1967 at a diner called the Rainbow Grill, where I waited tables for 85 cents an hour plus tips. He came in Thursdays for the meatloaf and never once ordered anything else in 6 months. He was 31, quiet, with hands like a bricklayer, which is what his father had been. His family ran Petrakis Masonry, and Dem had ideas his father thought were foolish, that a bricklaying outfit could become a real construction company if somebody kept the books right and bid the jobs smart. I could keep books. I'd been doing my father's household ledger since I was 12. We married in 1969 at Saints Constantine and Helen. My whole dowry, with a good head for numbers and a refusal to be cheated. And Dem used to say those 2 things were worth more than 100 acres. For 31 years, I was the office of Petrakis Construction. I did payroll. I did the bids. I did the fights with subcontractors who thought a woman wouldn't notice a padded invoice. I noticed everything. That was always my trouble and my gift. I notice everything, and I never say so until it matters. We bought the house on Cobb Avenue in 1974. 11 rooms, 2 stories, red brick that Dem laid himself on weekends. 2,600 square feet on a corner lot with a maple out front that was a sapling then and is a giant now. We paid $34,000 for it, and we paid it off in 9 years by living like we still made 85 cents an hour. That house held every good thing I ever had. We raised our son Nicholas in it. Dem died in it, in the front room, in February of 2011, of a heart that just quietly stopped one Tuesday morning while he was reading the sports page. The last real thing Dem and I did together, 3 nights before he died, was play backgammon. That set is the center of this whole story, so let me tell you about it. It's a walnut case, about the size of a large book, with the points inlaid in ivory and dark cherry, and the checkers are Bakelite, cream and oxblood, worn smooth at the edges from 40 years of thumbs. His father brought it from Thessaloniki in 1952. Dem taught me to play the first winter we were married, sitting on the floor because we couldn't afford a second chair, and for 42 years we played nearly every night. He kept a running score in a little green notebook. When he died, I was ahead by 1,140 games to 1,102. I never let him forget it, and he never once let me win. I kept the set in the drawer under the stairs, wrapped in the flannel shirt he died in, and I did not open it for years, because opening it was more than I could do. Now, Nicholas, my son. Nicholas is a good man who married a difficult woman, which happens to good men. He met Brooke in 2016 at a real estate seminar in Grand Rapids. She was selling a course on flipping distressed properties, which should have told everybody something. She was 34 then, blonde, gym hard, with a way of looking at a room and pricing everything in it. They married in 2018. I paid for half the wedding, $14,000, and I did it gladly because Nicholas looked happy and I wanted to like her. I tried to like her. God knows I tried. The early years were fine if you didn't look closely, and I always look closely. Brooke was attentive in the way that costs nothing. Cards on my birthday, a Facebook post on Mother's Day tagging me the strongest woman I know. When my grandson Elias was born in 2019, I fell in love the honest way, all the way down, and I babysat him 2 days a week for 4 years, and it was the best work I ever did that didn't involve a ledger. Brooke let me because free childcare is free childcare. I saw that clearly, and I did it anyway. Elias was worth it. The first wrong note came in the spring of 2021. Brooke sat at my kitchen table, at the same spot where she'd later shoved that paper at me, and she said, sweetly, "Have you ever thought about what happens to this big old house, Lois? It's a lot for one person. You could be sitting on $400,000 of equity, just, rotting here." I said I'd thought about it plenty, and that I planned to rot here quite comfortably. She laughed like I'd made a joke, but I filed it. I file everything. The second note was money. In 2022, Nicholas's masonry supply business hit a rough patch. He'd taken over pieces of his father's trade. And Brooke started asking me, in that concerned voice she has, whether it was smart for me to keep so much tied up in a house when family could use it. She'd found out somehow that the house was clear and that I had savings. I never told her a number. But she started treating me like an account that hadn't been drawn on yet. The third note was the one that made the hair stand up on my arms. It was Thanksgiving, 2023. I'd made everything, the lamb, the pasticcio, $40 of groceries from the Meijer on Gull Road, and 2 days of work. After dinner, I overheard Brooke in the hallway, on her phone, saying, "No, she's still sharp, that's the problem. But she's 75. It's just a matter of setting things up right. You establish a pattern." She saw me and smiled and said, "Talking to my sister. Sorry, boring stuff." Establish a pattern. I turned that phrase over in my hands for a year. In early 2024, the pattern arrived. And it was clever, I'll give her that. It was the kind of thing that works precisely because it's small. Brooke started leaving things in odd places. My reading glasses in the freezer, the car keys in the medicine cabinet. Once, the TV remote inside the flour canister. At first, I thought I'd done it, and my stomach dropped the way anyone's would. And that drop is exactly what she was hunting for. But I told you, I notice everything. And what I noticed was that these lapses only happened on days Brooke had been in the house, and that she always mentioned them to Nicholas within the hour, in a worried little voice where I could hear. "Mom put the remote in the flour again," she'd say. "I'm getting scared, Nick." I hadn't put it anywhere. I started keeping my own notes. I bought a $12 spiral notebook, the same brand of green as Dem's old scorebook, and I wrote down every incident, the date, the time, where Brooke had been, who was home. By March, I had 19 entries and a pattern of my own, running exactly opposite to hers. Then Dem's brother had a stroke in Portage and lingered 8 weeks and died. And I spent a lot of time at his bedside. And I came home one April evening bone-tired to find that Brooke and Nicholas and Elias had moved in. Not visited, moved in. Their house in Texas Township, the one they'd over-leveraged in 2021, had, Brooke explained, some issues with the market, and it just made sense, temporarily, for the family to consolidate, and wasn't it better for me not to be rattling around alone, and she'd already put Elias's bed in the back room. She said all this in my own front hall while I was still holding my coat. I said temporarily was fine. I even meant it. Elias hugged my legs and said, Yaya's house, and my whole chest went warm, and I thought, I can manage Brooke for Elias. That was April. By June, temporarily had become permanent, and the campaign turned professional. She stopped hiding the glasses in the freezer. That was amateur hour, and she knew it. Now she kept a real log on her laptop, and she made sure I saw the screen once. Cognitive decline, L. Petrakis, with dated entries. She took me to a doctor I'd never met, a doctor, Ferris, in a strip mall off West Edge, and steered the entire appointment, answering questions I hadn't been asked, saying she gets confused over my own voice. She had a durable power of attorney drawn up and put it in front of me one night with dinner still on the table, and when I said I'd like to read it first, she sighed like I was being difficult and said, Lois, you literally can't follow it. That's the whole point. Just let me help you. I did not sign it. That was the first time I saw a real cold flicker behind her eyes. In July, she started with the word sell. The house was a fall risk. The stairs were a death trap. A woman in my condition shouldn't be isolated in a museum. She had a Silverbridge brochure on my counter within a week. She had, I later learned, already talked to a listing agent about 1,120 Cobb Avenue. Comps run, a whisper price of $412,000 before I'd agreed to a single thing. And she'd started telling people I was slipping. That was the cruelest part, and the most useful, and I clocked both. She told Nicholas, gently, relentlessly, until my own son started watching me eat with a worried face. She told the neighbors. She should not have told the neighbors, because one of the neighbors was Verna. Verna Ostrowski has lived across Cobb Avenue since 1981. She's 81, sharp as a tack, a retired county court stenographer who spent 34 years writing down every word people said under oath and forgetting none of it. Verna and I have had coffee from a percolator in her sunroom among her 40-some African violets nearly every Wednesday for 4 decades. Verna does not miss things either. It's why we get along. Brooke made the mistake of trying to recruit her, stopped her at the mailboxes in August and said, in that confiding way, "You've noticed it too, right, with Lois?" The confusion? And Verna, who told me this the same afternoon with her jaw set, said, "I've noticed her win at Gin Rummy every Wednesday for 20 years, dear, including yesterday. What exactly have you noticed?" Brooke said something and walked off. But Verna crossed the street to my kitchen that day, sat down and said, "Lois, that girl is building a case against you. I've watched people build cases my whole working life. I know the smell of it. What are we going to do?" I could have kissed her. The boiling point came on a Tuesday in November of 2024. I remember it was Tuesday because it was the same day of the week Dem died, and I never don't notice that. That's the morning she slid the paper across the table, with the 2 Silverbridge men watching, put her hand over mine, and said the thing you heard at the start. A confused old woman rattling around alone. You get confused when there's a lot of words, remember? She said it in front of strangers, in the kitchen where I'd fed her family for 6 years, and she smiled, and I set the pen down. What Brooke didn't know, what she'd been too busy performing to ever check, was that 3 weeks earlier the machine had already started, and she was standing inside it. Here's the click. It wasn't rage. I want to be honest about that, because people expect rage, and rage is not what happened. What happened was that I looked at Brooke's hand on top of mine, and I felt the last warm thing I had for her go quietly out, like a pilot light, and in its place came something clean and cold and very, very organized. She wasn't family anymore. She was a padded invoice. And I have been catching padded invoices since 1969. The night before the Silverbridge visit, I didn't know it was coming, but I'd known something was. I'd already made the phone call. I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. I called Coyne. Margaret Coyne is an elder law attorney in a brick office on South Street, 62, and I'd known her work for years because she'd handled Dem's brother's estate, and I watched her take apart a nephew who tried to loot it. She has a low, dry voice, and she does not waste it. When I told her, over the phone, the whole shape of it, the glasses in the freezer, the log on the laptop, the doctor in the strip mall, the DPOA, the word sell, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said the sentence I've kept ever since. Mrs. Petrakis, people who plan to take a house usually forget to check who's actually holding it. Do you know exactly what you own? And can you prove your mind is your own? I said, to both of those, yes. Come to my house Thursday, and I'll show you what's in the drawer under the stairs. Here is the card. Let me lay it flat on the table for you, the way I eventually laid it flat for the court, because the whole thing turns on two ordinary pieces of paper. Piece 1, the deed. The house at 1120 Cobb Avenue was never in a trust Brooke could touch, never jointly held with Nicholas, never anything but mine. Sole owner, Lois A. Petrakis, free and clear since we burned the mortgage in 1983. Brooke assumed, because Nicholas was my son and lived under my roof, that the house was some soft family asset that would slide her way once the confused old woman was managed. It was not. It was a fortress with exactly one name on the wall, and the name was mine. You cannot be helped into signing away a house by a guardian if you were never incompetent to begin with, and if the house was never anyone's to help you with. Piece 2, and this is the one that ended her, was a clean, current, professional cognitive evaluation, because I am not a woman who waits to be accused. Back in September of 2024, when I first understood which way Brooke was steering the doctor's visits, I did the coldest, smartest thing of my life. On my own, quietly, I made an appointment at the Bronson Neuroscience Center with a geriatric neuropsychologist named Dr. Adeze Okonkwo. I paid the $1,850 myself out of an account Brooke didn't know existed. I spent 4 hours doing every test they had, the MOCA, the memory batteries, the executive function work, all of it, with no one steering, no daughter-in-law answering for me. I scored a 29 out of 30. Dr. Okonkwo wrote in the formal report I asked her to prepare and date and sign that I showed no evidence of cognitive impairment and full capacity to manage personal, legal, and financial affairs. Then I put that report in the drawer under the stairs, on top of the flannel shirt, beside Dem's backgammon set, and I waited. That is what my daughter-in-law was up against. She just didn't know it yet. Coyne came Thursday. Verna sat in on it, because Verna is a witness worth having in the room and can transcribe a conversation in shorthand faster than most people can talk. I got the walnut case out of the drawer, moved it gently to the sideboard to clear the table. I remember running my thumb over the inlay, the way Dem used to before a game, a small habit of steadiness. And then I laid out everything. The deed, the evaluation, my green notebook with 19, now 31, dated entries showing that every lapse Brooke reported happened only when Brooke was present. Bank records showing I'd been paying my own bills on time for 14 years, never a late fee. A copy of the DPOA she'd tried to make me sign. And, because Verna had thought of it, a list of 6 neighbors and the pharmacist and my hairdresser of 22 years, every one of whom would swear I was as sharp as I'd ever been. Coyne read it all with her glasses down her nose. When she finished, she took them off and said, "Mrs. Petrakis, I have to ask, why haven't you just thrown her out? It's your house. You could have her removed." And I said, "Because she hasn't filed yet, and I want her to file." Coyne looked at me for a long moment, and then, for the first time, she smiled. "You want the petition on the record." "I want it on the record," I said, "and I want it thrown out where Nicholas can see the whole thing with his own eyes. If I just throw her out, she'll spend the rest of her life telling my son I was too confused to know what I was doing. I don't want to win the house. I already own the house. I want to win the story." Verna's pencil had stopped. She was looking at me the way you look at someone you've decided all over again to be proud of. So we waited, and we prepared, and we let Brooke build. It didn't take long. The pen on the table performance with the Silverbridge men rattled her, because I'd set the pen down and said calmly, "No thank you, I'll be keeping the house," and then walked out to Verna's for the afternoon. That night, Nicholas found me and asked, worried, if I was doing all right, and I told him I loved him and that he should watch what happened next very carefully. Brooke decided the soft approach had failed. She went to a lawyer of her own, a personal injury man named Del Rucker, who mostly did car wrecks, and in December of 2024, she filed a petition in Kalamazoo County Probate Court to be appointed my guardian and conservator, alleging I was an incapacitated adult, unable to manage my affairs or safely reside alone. She had Dr. Ferris's strip mall notes. She had her laptop log. She had photographs she'd staged, the freezer glasses, the flower remote. She had my own son's worried face, which she'd manufactured over a year and now planned to put on the stand. She thought she was bringing a case. She was bringing herself to the exact spot I'd cleared for her. I did almost nothing in those weeks, and doing nothing correctly is the hardest work there is. Coyne filed a simple appearance on my behalf. We did not tip our hand. We let Rucker and Brooke believe I was represented by some tired old lawyer who'd put up a token fight for a fading client. Coyne even let them think I might be coming around to the idea of assistance. Brooke, I heard later from Nicholas, told her sister the case was basically a formality. She started, before the hearing, showing the Silverbridge agent around my first floor. She measured the front room for staging. She measured my front room, where Dem died. I let her. The hearing was set for the morning of February 18th, 2025, at the probate court on Michigan Avenue. But there was a wrinkle that turned out to be the sweetest part. Because I had mobility concerns, per Brooke's own filing, and because the judge wanted to observe me in my home environment, Judge Halloran ordered a portion of the proceeding, the capacity observation, to be held at the residence itself, at 1120 Cobb Avenue, in my front room. Brooke thought that was a gift. She thought the judge would walk into a museum full of an old woman's clutter and see exactly the frail relics she'd described. She spent the week before helping by making the house look as sad as she could. She unscrewed a bulb in the hall so it flickered, left a sweater on the floor, let the porch light stay burned out. The morning of the 18th, it was 19 degrees, and the maple out front was black against a white sky. Judge Halloran arrived at 10, a compact woman of about 60 with reading glasses on a chain, along with a court-appointed guardian ad litem named Mr. Pruitt, whose job was to represent my interests independently and who had, unknown to Brooke, already interviewed Verna and the pharmacist and read my notebook. Rucker came in a shiny suit. Brooke wore gray, soft and modest, and she'd coached Nicholas to sit beside her, looking grave. Elias was at school. Coyne wore brown and carried one thin folder. They set chairs in a semicircle in my front room. The backgammon set sat closed on the sideboard where I'd left it, walnut catching the gray light, and I put my hand on it once before I sat down, the way Dem used to before he rolled. Rucker went first, and he was good in the cheap way, all warm concern. He walked the judge through the log, the staged photos, the freezer, the flower, the tragic but common decline of a beloved matriarch. He said the word confused 6 times. He said I was a danger to myself alone in this large home. Brooke dabbed at a dry eye. It was a real performance, and for about 20 minutes, the whole room tilted toward her, and I let it. Because a thing only breaks cleanly when it's carrying full weight. Then Judge Halloran turned to me and asked me, herself, a few plain questions. What year was it? Who was the president? Could I tell her about my finances? Did I understand what my daughter-in-law was asking the court to do? And I answered. I told her the date, February 18th, 2025, and the day of the week, and I noted mildly that it was a Tuesday, the same day of the week my husband had died in that very room 14 years earlier, in case she wanted to test whether I knew what room we were in. I told her I owned the house outright, gave her the parcel number from memory, told her I'd paid it off in 1983 and what we'd paid for it in 1974 and roughly what it was worth now. I described my accounts to the dollar. I told her I understood completely what Brooke was asking the court to do, and that Brooke was asking it because Brooke wanted to sell my house and could not do so as long as I was of sound mind and holding the deed. The room had gone very quiet. Rucker's warm face had stopped moving. Then Coyne opened her thin folder. She stood, and in that low, dry voice she said, Your Honor, the petitioner alleges my client lacks capacity. I'd like to enter 2 documents. She handed the first to the judge and to Mr. Pruitt. This is the recorded deed to 1120 Cobb Avenue, showing sole ownership in Lois A. Petrakis, unencumbered since 1983. The petitioner appears to have assumed this asset was a family holding. It is not. It has one owner. She handed over the second. And this is a comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation performed on September 9th, 2024, 3 months before this petition was filed, by Dr. Adeze Okonkwo at Bronson Neuroscience Center, unsupervised and self-arranged by my client, who paid for it herself. My client scored 29 out of 30. The physician's written conclusion is no evidence of cognitive impairment and full capacity to manage personal, legal, and financial affairs. Dr. Okonkwo is present in the hall and available to testify. She let that sit for one breath. The petitioner's own alleged incidents are cataloged here. She laid down my green notebook, in my client's contemporaneous hand, and every single one occurs only when the petitioner was in the home. Ms. Ostrowski across the street, a retired court stenographer, has provided a signed and timed account. The petitioner did not bring a case of incapacity, Your Honor. She brought a real estate plan and dressed it as concern. I watched Brooke's face while Coyne spoke, and I will tell you exactly what happened to it because I'd waited 11 months to see it. First, the color left it. It went from that Jim flush pink to a flat gray from the jaw up, all at once, the way a wall goes gray when the sun leaves it. Then her eyes went to Nicholas, fast, looking for the ground, and Nicholas had turned in his chair to stare at her, and there was nothing in his face for her to stand on. Then her hand went to the arm of the chair, my chair, Dem's chair, and gripped it. And then she did the thing I'd known she would do, because cowards under a mask of power always do it. She reached for a smaller lie. That evaluation could be, she could have had a good day, Brooke said, and her voice had climbed and thinned. People with decline have good days. Everyone knows that. One test doesn't. Judge Halloran took off her reading glasses. Mrs. Petrakis just recited her parcel number and the day her husband died and the balance of 3 accounts from memory, the judge said, dry as a stick. I've been on this bench 19 years. I know what a good day looks like, and I know what a competent adult looks like. This is the second. She turned a page. Mr. Rucker, your client staged photographs and unscrewed a hallway bulb to influence a court observation in a private home. Do you want to keep going? Rucker did not want to keep going. Rucker wanted to be in a car wreck case somewhere far away. Mr. Pruitt, the guardian ad litem, cleared his throat and said what he'd come to say, that he'd interviewed 6 neighbors, the pharmacist, and my hairdresser, reviewed 14 years of on-time bill payments, and found not a shred of evidence of incapacity, and that in his professional opinion, the petition was not merely unsupported, but appears to have been brought in bad faith for financial gain. He recommended it be dismissed with prejudice. Judge Halloran dismissed the petition with prejudice at 11:40 that morning in my front room, with the walnut backgammon case sitting closed and gleaming on the sideboard 6 feet from Brooke's gray face. Dismissed with prejudice means she cannot bring it again. It is a door that locks from my side. Then the judge added the part I hadn't dared hope for. She looked at Brooke and said, "This court finds the petition was filed in bad faith. Mrs. Petrakis, your attorney may petition for costs and fees against the petitioner, and I'm inclined to grant them." Coyne did. We were awarded $18,400 in fees and costs, payable by Brooke personally, and the judge referred the staged evidence matter to the county for review. Brooke didn't cry. I'll give her that much. She wasn't the type. She sat very still and gray, and she looked, for the first time in 6 years, like exactly what she was, a woman who'd bet on someone else being weak and lost the whole hand. I didn't gloat. I want you to know that. I'd done my gloating years earlier, quietly, in the drawer under the stairs, every time I laid that evaluation back on top of Dem's flannel shirt and closed the lid. By the time it fired in that room, I was calm as still water. I just stood up when the judge left, and I walked to the sideboard, and I put my hand flat on the backgammon set, and I breathed. Brooke and her things were out of my house by the first week of March. Nicholas helped her move, and then Nicholas did not move with her. That is the part I'll only touch gently, because it's my son's private grief and not a trophy. He filed for divorce that spring. He'd sat in that front room and watched his wife of 7 years try to have his mother declared insane to sell the house his father built with his own hands, and heard her, when it collapsed, reach for a smaller lie instead of the truth. There's no coming back from a thing your own eyes saw. He got joint custody of Elias. He and Elias moved back into the 2 rooms upstairs, the honest way this time, with rent he insisted on paying, $600 a month that I mostly put in a college account for the boy, though I never told him that. Brooke paid the $18,400. It took her a year. The last check cleared in April of 2026, and I put it in Elias's account too, every dollar, which felt like the right place for money she'd tried to take from a house she called a museum. Verna and I still have coffee Wednesdays, among the violets, from the percolator. She kept her shorthand notes from the hearing in a manila folder marked Lois's Good Day, and once, when I was low, she read them back to me in the judge's dry voice, and we laughed until we couldn't breathe. Coyne sends a Christmas card. Dr. Okonkwo, when I ran into her at the Meijer on Gull Road, said scoring 29 out of 30 at 76 was, frankly, obnoxious, which is the finest compliment I've had since Dem died. It's a Tuesday evening now, in the front room, and the porch light works because I put a new bulb in it myself, standing on the step stool at 77, confused old woman that I am. Elias is 8. He came in from the cold with wet socks and red cheeks and asked if we could play the game with the fancy ivory circles, because his papu taught his yaya, and his yaya is teaching him, and that's how it goes in this family, down the line, in this house. I got the walnut case down from the drawer under the stairs. I unwrapped it from the flannel shirt. I opened the board on the table where his mother once slid a paper at me and called me confused. And I set out the cream and oxblood checkers, worn smooth by 40 years of Dem's thumbs and now warming under a boy's. And I got out the little green notebook to start him a score of his own. Your papu was ahead of nobody in this house, I told Elias, and I rolled the dice in the front room of the house that is mine, that has one name on the deed, and that name is Petrakis, and it always will be.